Good evening. As always, I am your creepy consular, and you have found yourself here in the Vale. Before I approve your visa to travel to the other side, you will need to take this with you. The creepy consular hands you a mask resembling a lamb. You instinctively pick up the mask to put it on your face, but before you do, the creepy consular places a hand on the mask and shakes his head. You don't want to put this on just yet, explained the creepy consular. But before you go, please remember my advice. If you ever feel uneasy, or if they notice you at any point, run, and I will open the veil for you again. I won't bore you with too much needless build-up. I want to get this done with, written, and out of my head as soon as I possibly can. That, and I've booked myself a flight home early in the morning, and I really should get some rest. My body needs it. In short, I'm in Venice, Italy, and I had the worst night of my entire life. I was already having a rough go at it, curled up beneath a makeshift duvet of dried tissues as I was sweating out a pretty gnarly cold I'd likely contracted a few days before my flight. After about 4 hours of aimlessly writhing on my minuscule hostel mattress, I simply got fed up with trying to sleep and propped myself up on my elbows and reached over for my phone. It was there, as I fumbled around pathetically in the dark, that I saw it. Not my phone, mind you, but a face, part of one, at least, in the bathroom doorway across from my bed. It took a moment of pallid staring, with my heart practically in my throat, for me to realize that I was seeing but the image of a face, plastered up on the restroom door, halfway hidden by the darkness, within the darkness, that was the windowless bathroom. Slowly, and with a sickly strained groan, I rose to my feet and hobbled over to the door, weakly grasping the knob and pulling the door closed so as to examine the image under the full light of the moon trickling through my window. I stood there, snot oozing from my clogged nostrils, as I stared at the photo pinned on the door. It wasn't just a face, but a yellow medium close-up, I believe that's the term, of a boy who appeared to be no more than my age if I were to wager a guess. The boy was not scowling, nor was he smiling, nor was he sobbing. The boy was simply peering at the camera, neutral and unbothered, arms folded calmly across his frock chest. His hair was black and slicked back. He wore a frock and cravat. A pair of oval eyeglasses sat nestled in his breast pocket. Bang! I nearly leapt out of my skin when the bedroom door was knocked hard. Prying myself away from the photograph, I shambled to the door, too hoarse to call for whoever was on the other side, and too stupid to glance through the peephole first. I yanked open the door to find, at my feet, a mask. To be precise, it was a lamb mask. Its facial features were carved of porcelain, and its fleece seemed to be composed of coarse strands of wool threaded through a series of holes on the outer edges like laces through a sneaker's eyelets. Its eyes, or the lack thereof, struck me as conveying the same stoic, unperturbed essence as the boy's did in the photograph, though I felt nothing of the sort. Terror was all that I felt. Needless to say, I did not put on that mask. I left it lying by my feet as my attention was drawn further down the hall by a distant murmur, a sort of hushed whispering that I found completely indecipherable through my clogged ears, which had yet to decompress from my flight's descent. My eyes drifted down the hallway, my blood going cold. Faces, 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 more photographs lined the hall, stretching into dark nothingness. Boys in frock coats, girls in corsets, a child holding some sort of dog, their eyes all fixed on the camera. On me. Fear overwhelming me, I turned to re-enter my room, likely planning to hide under the covers like a frightened child, My ears were met with a wet, abhorrent hiss. Trembling, my muscles fighting against me, I slowly looked up, up, up. Above the door was a cat. I say cat in quotes because cat is simply the best comparison I could make, though this was most definitely not a cat. It was gigantic, dwarfing me with its sheer girth. Its fur was dark, coarse, and matted, and it reeked horribly like musk and mildew. Its eyes were small but many, and glinted in the dim light like stars in the night sky, and I felt not only as though I was staring up at the stars, but that the stars were staring right back down at me. Had I had anything in my bowels or my bladder, they wouldn't have been able to remain there for long. As soon as I regained even a sliver of my composure, I shot my arm out to grasp the doorknob, but was stopped by a tight, moist hand clamping down around my wrist. It was difficult to see in the darkness, but though wrapped in fur, the hand which grasped my wrist felt wet and scaly, and sharp pointy claws as those of some great reptile dug into the flesh of my arm. I could see the dim outline of its slender forelimb snaking up to the beast above, disappearing from visibility behind the monster's back. Face. Its mouth opened, hundreds of voices thrumming at once in a discordant harmony. Face? I eked out at the threshold of audibility, terrified beyond description. Face. It, or they, repeated, a twisted mass of ragged arms slithering up from its back as it patted its gnarled face, rubbing its cheek with the wing of a bird, and patting its head with some sort of hoof. I could only venture a guess as to what it meant. Slowly kneeling, so as not to startle it, the claw still wrapped around my wrist, as I picked up the mask and tenderly affixed it to my face. The moment the cord slipped over my head, the beast released its grip, satisfied, before pointing a hoof, claw, paw, wing, and even a sapient's hand towards the inky black of the hallway. Before long, the monster simply skidded off on the legs of a spider, clinging to the roof as it disappeared into the void. I couldn't go back into my room. I wanted to, desperately, but the door had vanished from existence. Now I stood before nothing but a wall plastered with even more weathered, yellowed photographs of stalwart, stoic faces. So I walked. Down the hall, I walked. As I walked into the dark nothingness, that incoherent murmuring remained incoherent, but grew into a cacophonous cheering and whooping as though I were entering the Colosseum of Rome for a gladiatorial match. Then, from out of the void, emerged two aged wooden doors, which, as though they sensed my presence, gracefully swung open without so much as a peep. As I stepped through and found myself standing on the edge of a moonlit canal. There, as the cheering reached a definite roar, I heard what I could only describe as a bellow like the horn of a train from beyond the street corner up ahead. That bellow was soon accompanied by deep, thunderous stomps, which seemed to rattle the very earth below me, and the grating clinks and clanks of metal on metal like the rattling of an enormous chain. Then he emerged. From around the corner, a massive hoof came crashing down onto the pavement, the vibrations resonating all the way into my very soul. The hoof connected to a thick, hairy leg, which came up to a similarly bulky torso of incredible size and mass. I would best describe it as a minotaur, titanic and woolly, with massive horns that seemed to stretch upwards to infinity. Its face, however, was not that of a bull, but a man, a hideously ugly one too, with a snub nose, wrinkled features, and a pitiful expression as though it were perpetually feeling sorry for something. The Minotaur's wrists and calves were bound by mighty chains, as was the collar around its throat, and it shambled in such a pitiful, hunched-over manner that it seemed totally undeserving of the booming quakes which rung out with each of its steps. Through the eye holes of my mask, I saw its eyes meet mine as tears began to flow down its wrinkled, misshapen cheeks. House! The raspy voices of the cat suddenly boomed through my mind, and as I turned my head as if on instinct, I caught a glimpse of a small farmhouse at the end of the channel. Run, lamb, hide not like us. The voices rang out again, as I heard the bull's tremendous bellow roar. With a crash, the chain around its neck dropped limply to the ground, and the monster took off running, tears still falling down its cheeks, charging towards me. I took off running too, sprinting as fast as I could towards a tiny farmhouse in the distance, which now sat illuminated as if lit by a spotlight from the sky itself. Even with the chains around its calves, the bull was much faster than me, and I had to dive into an alleyway, skidding along the pavement and tearing up my arms just to narrowly escape its charge as it tore past. I ducked behind some rubble and clutched my bleeding arm, skin peeling and oozing red. I could hear over the cheering the musky breath of the minotaur as it tried to reach its colossal hands in to grab at me, but they simply wouldn't fit, not by a long shot. I just sat and waited, hoping if I waited enough, the bull would just go away. But I kept hearing that heavy panting, so damp and deep and dirty that I could practically envision the flecks of phlegm that flew from its wretched mouth with each heaving gasp. Then it stopped. Now, I thought to myself, shifting to make a break for it before the bull came back, but I was stopped cold by the cat's raspy voices as they screamed, "Not yet!" I glanced up, still clutching my throbbing arm as I saw the cat clung to the wall above me, before it clasped what seemed to be a flipper over its mouth, as if cursing itself for speaking. Sure enough, as I peeked around the rubble, I could see the titanic eye of the bull peering between the buildings, waiting for me like the colossal eye of a giant squid seen out of the porthole of a tiny submarine. It wasn't leaving. It wanted me. Maybe it even needed me. I couldn't wait this thing out. It had all the time in the world. As far as I was concerned, my only option was to try the other end of the alley. But that thought was nowhere near comforting. I had no clue what lay on the other side of the squeeze. A dead end? A sheer drop-off? Something worse? It didn't matter. I had to risk it. Shooting up onto my feet, I turned and ran towards the back end of the alley, with the braying of the bull at my back, and ran for my life. I ran, and I ran, constantly looking over my shoulder as I heard the thundering of the bull. I was so distracted by the beast that I ran face first into a brick wall, shattering my mask and peppering my face with shards of cracked porcelain, which sent a shower of red droplets pittering to the ground below. As I clutched at my stinging face, I heard the crowd boo mightily, before the booing turned into excited yips as the bull rounded the corner, staring me down from the far end of the back street. There was a moment of pause as we stared at each other, each of our faces dripping, mine with blood and its with tears, before, having no other choice, I made a mad dash towards the alley. The minotaur roared as it began to charge, nearly tripping over its chain as it did, as we ran headfirst towards each other as though it were a horrific game of chicken. Words cannot describe the relief I felt as I threw myself back into that alley, feeling the wind whoosh by as the bull charged past, having just barely missed me. Without a second thought, I ran back towards the front of the alley, and, now that the way was clear, I sprinted as fast as I possibly could towards that little, illuminated farmhouse at the end of the channel. The bull had rounded the corner back again, and in no time I heard its hefty hooves pummeling the earth while it barreled towards me with all of its might. But I was almost there. I was so close. The door was right in front of me and the beast was right behind me, and I could just about feel the twisted fur of its fingers scrape against my back as I burst into the farmhouse. As I turned back, my arms still bleeding profusely and my throat sore and ragged, I saw the bull attempting to stick its arm through the doorway to grab at me, before, with a deafening crack, the chain around its neck tightened and whipped it into the sky, dragging the bull with it. The minotaur kicked its beefy legs, writhing and shaking and bellowing like a cow giving birth as it clutched feverishly at its neck, choking and spluttering. It was dragged by the chain up, pulled up along the side of a building as it hung from its metallic noose, eyes wetter than ever, twisting and screaming. Soon enough, it had been pulled up into the night sky, and its frantic braying whisked away into nothing. "Congratu," the cat's voices rung out, failing to finish the word congratulations assumedly. From behind its back came a tornado of limbs, bug-like claws and talons tenderly picking the porcelain shards from my shredded cheeks. Once the cat had cleaned off my face and even sewn up my arm with an ethereal thread, it pointed a chimpanzee-like arm to a stool in the corner of the barn, before which was a camera perched atop a stand. Drained beyond drained, I hobbled over to the stool, sat myself down, and glared into the camera. The cat's voices cried out as the beast skittered over to the side of the camera, placing the finger of an ape-like hand on the button. "Envy you, winner." The flash of the camera turned my whole world white. The whiteness faded to black, and I was falling. I fell and fell for what felt like hours, before, with such suddenness, I was startled. I shot up in my bed. It was day. I was in my room. There were no photos on the wall, and the voices had stopped. Without a moment's hesitation, I shot to my feet and began to tear off my clothing as I ran into the bathroom, standing before the mirror completely naked while I looked myself over. I was a mess. Both of my eyes were bruised, and small scars pocked my cheeks. My arms were flaking with dead, bloodied skin, held together loosely only by a thin, wispy thread that had sewn the wound shut. What surprised me, above all else, was what seemed to be a tattoo. A dark black splotch in the shape of a lamb, seared right over my heart. Understandably, all I want right now is to go home. I want to stop writing, I want to pack my things, and I want to go home because I cannot handle this. I don't know where I was, what happened to me, or what will happen next. But if there's anything I'm almost certain of, it's that I've been marked.